Not so long ago, being a parent in Britain looked very, very different. If you grew up in the 1960s, a lot of what your mum and dad did would have social services knocking on the door today. Back then it was just called bringing up the kids. Now half of that would look like a criminal case. In this video, we're going to look at 10 ways 1960s British parents raised their children that would be illegal, or at least highly suspicious, today. For some of you, this will be a trip down memory lane. For others, it'll sound like another planet. 1. The belt, the slipper, and just wait till your father gets home. Let's start with the big one. In 1960s Britain, hitting your kids was simply called discipline. The belt hanging on the back of the kitchen door, the wooden spoon, the hard-soled slipper, these weren't hidden away. They were part of the furniture. A forgotten chore, talking back, getting a bad school report. Many kids knew exactly what was coming. Sometimes it was a quick smack, sometimes a full-on hiding, and it wasn't always behind closed doors. A child being slapped in the supermarket aisle or dragged out of the bus by the ear was just Tuesday. Today, repeated hitting that leaves marks is classed as assault. In parts of the UK, any physical punishment is now illegal. Even where it isn't, teachers, neighbours and doctors are told to report it. But in the 60s, a lot of parents genuinely believed a good smack never did me any harm. That was the soundtrack of a generation. 2. Smoke-filled childhoods. If you grew up in a smoking household in the 60s, your lungs didn't stand a chance. Parents smoked absolutely everywhere. At the dinner table, over the pram, in bed reading a bedtime story, in the car with the windows barely cracked. The classic scene, mum or dad driving, one hand on the wheel, one hand on a cigarette, the ash dangerously long, kids bouncing around in the back. Everybody breathing in the same haze. Living rooms turned yellow. Curtains and wallpaper absorbed decades of nicotine. Many babies went home from the maternity ward straight into a permanent fog. Today, smoking in enclosed workplaces is banned. In most of the UK, it's illegal to smoke in a car with a child inside. Public health campaigns hammer home the dangers of second-hand smoke. But for parents in the 60s, lighting up was just part of being an adult. If the kids were coughing in the corner, well, they'd grow out of it. 3. No car seats, no seat belts, no problem. Speaking of cars, road safety for children in the 1960s was basically hold on tight. Many family cars didn't even have rear seat belts. Car seats, if they existed at all, were flimsy plastic things designed more so the child could see out of the window than to save their life. Kids stood up behind the front seats, climbed from the back to the front, fought over who got the hump in the middle. Some sat on mum's lap in the passenger seat, others in the back of estate cars with no seats at all, just rolling around with the shopping. Long trips to the seaside meant 3 kids asleep on the parcel shelf, their heads gently bouncing against the rear window. Today, strict laws require approved child seats, proper restraints and seat belts for everyone. Driving with a toddler on your lap would get you stopped in minutes, but back then, if you suggested strapping a child down for every journey, many parents would have laughed. To them it felt fussy, overprotective, and frankly, a bit un-British. 4. Being left home alone far too young. Another big difference, how early children were left to fend for themselves. In many working-class families, both parents were out of the house for long hours. Older kids, sometimes as young as 8 or 9, were expected to keep an eye on younger brothers and sisters. You'd get instructions like, "There are fish fingers in the freezer, don't touch the gas and don't open the door to strangers." And then mum disappeared for a double shift and dad was on nights. If the baby cried, the 9-year-old handled it. If someone fell, there was no ambulance, just a bit of TCP and you'll live. Today there's no fixed legal age for leaving a child alone, but parents can be prosecuted if it's judged unsafe or neglectful. A toddler alone in a flat while mum goes shopping would almost certainly mean social services. In the 60s it was often just survival. Parents didn't always have a choice, and the system didn't ask many questions. 5. Pop to the shop and get my fags and a bottle. One of the most unbelievable sights to modern eyes is children casually buying cigarettes and alcohol for their parents. A mum might scribble a note. "Please sell my son 20 players and a bottle of stout Mrs. Jones from number 12, and send her 10-year-old off to the corner shop." The shopkeeper knew the family, took the note and handed over the goods without blinking. Sometimes there wasn't even a note. A familiar kid asking for Dad's usual brand was good enough. On Friday evenings, tiny children could be seen staggering home with clinking shopping bags full of beer bottles. It was considered responsible. The parent wasn't drinking in the pub, they were drinking at home. Nowadays, selling cigarettes or alcohol to minors is strictly illegal, and shops can be heavily fined. Staff are trained to ask for ID even from nervous 25-year-olds. The idea of a child queuing at the till with a bottle of whiskey and a packet of fags feels like something out of a dark comedy. But in 1960s Britain, it meant you were trusted. 6. Be back before dark. The disappearing child. Ask anyone who grew up in the 60s and they'll tell you, you spent most of your childhood outside and almost none of it supervised. The basic rule was simple. After breakfast you were told to go out and play, that was it. No smartphone, no GPS tracker, no hourly check-ins. You roamed the estate, climbed into bomb sites and half-finished building works, played on railway embankments, poked around canals and ponds, and accepted sweets from whatever friendly neighbour happened to be passing. You came home when you were hungry, or when the streetlights flickered on, whichever happened first. Parents didn't know exactly where you'd been, and, if we're honest, often didn't ask. As long as you turned up in roughly one piece, it was fine. Today, letting a 6-year-old wander miles from home alone could easily be seen as neglect. Social workers and police now take a very different view of freedom. But for many 60s parents, a child under their feet all day was a sign they were doing something wrong. A good childhood meant scraped knees, risky adventures, and absolutely no adults watching. 7. Kids doing jobs adults wouldn't touch. Another way 1960s parents raised their kids would raise eyebrows now. They expected children to do work that today would be considered far too dangerous or exhausting. Paper rounds in the dark before school, carrying huge bags almost as big as the child, helping Dad on the building site, holding ladders, fetching bricks, sweeping up nails, washing the family's clothes in boiling water, using harsh chemicals with bare hands, leaning out of upstairs windows to clean them. No safety gear, no training, just be careful and don't be soft. In rural areas, kids helped with heavy farm work, lifting feed sacks, herding animals, riding on tractors or trailers with nothing to hold on to. Many of these things would now be forbidden by health and safety rules or minimum age laws. Of course, some people look back and say, it taught us responsibility, and maybe it did, but it also put children in harm's way in a way that would be very difficult to defend in court today. 8. Public humiliation as a parenting tool. If you misbehaved in public in 1960s Britain, your parents didn't wait until you got home. Discipline often happened right there in front of everyone. A slap across the legs in the supermarket queue, a sharp cuff round the head on the bus, being dragged out of the church service by the wrist while everyone pretended not to look. Some parents used humiliation as part of the punishment, making a child stand outside a shop alone to think about what you've done, or forcing them to apologise loudly to an adult in front of a whole crowd. Today, repeatedly shaming a child in public could be interpreted as emotional abuse. Teachers and bystanders are encouraged to report concerning behaviour, but at the time, most adults would have nodded approvingly. Good for her, kids these days need discipline. That social approval made it very hard for any child to complain. 9. Sort it out yourselves, turning a blind eye to bullying. Another parenting attitude that would shock many people now is how casually bullying was dismissed. If you came home with ripped clothes or bruises from school and told your parents, the most common reply was some version of, well, hit him back then, or don't be such a baby. The idea of a mum marching into school demanding meetings, anti-bullying policies and safeguarding procedures just wasn't part of the culture. Being picked on was seen as part of growing up, something that built character. Even name-calling about weight, disability, race or class was rarely challenged. Today, schools are constantly reminded of their duty of care. Parents can, and do, involve the police or local authorities if bullying gets serious. Repeated emotional cruelty can be treated as abuse. But many 60s parents honestly believed that stepping in would make things worse. Instead, they encouraged their children to toughen up, even if it meant learning to fight. 10. Children should be seen and not heard. Finally, we have the overall attitude that shaped everything else. Children in 1960s, Britain had very few rights and almost no voice. Meals were served when adults decided. You ate what you were given or went hungry. You sat quietly while visitors were in the house. You didn't interrupt adult conversation. If you cried too loudly, you were told off. If you disagreed, you were cheeky. Your feelings weren't part of the equation. Today, social workers, teachers and doctors are trained to listen to children directly. The law recognises emotional harm, not just physical harm. A child saying, "I'm scared to go home," must be taken seriously. Back then, if you'd told someone my parents scare me, the response might well have been, "Well then behave yourself." That's a huge shift in just 2 or 3 generations. So those are 10 ways 1960s British parents raised their kids that would be illegal, or at least completely unacceptable most today. For some of you, this might sound harsh, but familiar. You can still smell the cigarette smoke in the car, still feel the sting of the slipper, still remember the taste of freedom on those long, unsupervised summer days. For younger viewers, it might be hard to believe your parents and grandparents grew up like this in a country that now talks so much about safeguarding and child protection. Society hasn't suddenly become perfect, but these stories show just how quickly attitudes can change. What feels normal in one decade can look shocking in the next. Which of these brought back the strongest memories or surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you'd like more forgotten stories from Britain's past, don't forget to subscribe.